Hi and welcome everybody. We'll try this again today. For those of you who didn't see my previous live event that I had yesterday, I'm sorry about that. Actually, both yesterday and today are pretty much just trial runs because I want to learn how this works. But while I'm doing that, I might as well answer the questions that you might have. So please bring them to me. As always, if there's a lot of questions, I will just answer them on a first come, first served basis. And I'll prioritize questions that I feel are relevant and I think that you guys want me to talk about. So keep them coming. And also, for those of you who are new to the channel and haven't seen any of my previous videos, feel free to subscribe. The more followers I have, the more content I'll be able to give you, because this really just builds on you guys asking me questions and me explaining whatever I can explain. I'm not an expert in all fields, but I have been working for around 13 years here now. And I think that there's probably a couple of things that I have at least an opinion on that you might find valuable. So send in your questions. I am trying to get the group chat working today as well. It didn't work yesterday for whatever reason. And I don't see anyone actually coming in today either. So for some reason, I don't know why the group chat doesn't seem to work. Those of you who are better than me at doing this, please feel free to send me a message explaining why I can't get the group chat working. So anyway, let's see. I have my Instagram account up and running, and you're free to go into my latest picture there and just ask your questions as part of that feed. I also have Twitter. So you can tweet me any questions that you might have as well, and I will be answering them as we go. Until we can start with that, there were some questions yesterday that I didn't have time to answer, and also yesterday's live broadcast was kind of interrupted because the internet went down, and that might happen today as well, because my internet connection here in Spain is a little bit dodgy, especially now during the summer month when there's a lot of pressure on it. So if this suddenly just stops out of me there, it's because my internet has gone down. Okay. So let's see if there's any questions coming in. So far, not much. Yeah, so yesterday I had one of you guys, and by the way, I want you guys to include your names in the questions, okay, your proper names, just your first name, because I don't know how many Tomahawk 1100X I'll be able to pronounce. So just give me your first name and I will read out the question that you're asking and then answer with your name, right? That's how I want this to work. So let's see, there are some questions coming in now. Once again, it doesn't seem to work by sending in comments on my YouTube account, because apparently that doesn't seem to be working while I am doing this live stream. So please use Instagram or Twitter for now. Or if you can, try to enter. I don't comment in that case because I can't see anything. You can only see my own tweets here. So let's see. No questions so far on Instagram. So one of you guys asked me how old I was yesterday, and I am 34. Well, actually I'm 33, but I'm turning 34 now in September. So I've been working for about 13 years. I started off when I was 20. As I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, I started training when I was only 17. So I moved away from home and I did my training in a government-sponsored program in Sweden, which I started when I was 17. So I actually had my pilot license before I had my driver's license, which is not what people can say, I guess. Which meant that when I was 20, I had managed to get the required licenses to apply for and the required licenses that you will need is you need a minimum of CPL, preferably with ATPL frozen connected to it. You need an instrument rating. You need an MCC course, and you need a multi-engine rating. So once you have attained that, then you can apply. And I get a lot of questions about whether or not you can apply to airlines with only 200 hours or so. And the answer to that is it depends. Okay, it depends on which airline we're talking about, and it also depends on what part of the world you're coming from. So in the United States, the answer to that is no. As far as I know, you need 1,500 hours of total time in order to apply for a commercial airline in the States. There you're going to have to do some hour building, which means flying maybe as a flight instructor in a local flying school, or towing gliders, or parachuters, or anything like that. And in Europe it's a bit different. So in Europe we don't have any rule of 1,500 hours, which means that it's up to the airlines to choose what kind of experience they want the first officers to come in with. And there are quite a few airlines who are taking on cadets. Actually, most of them have cadet programs of some sort. So yeah, in Europe, if you have 200 hours and you have all the required licenses, you can apply to these airlines. I know Ryanair, for example, is having a huge need of young pilots at the moment. They're taking in about 600 cadets per year. EasyJet are recruiting as well, and I think Jet2 is recruiting, if I'm not mistaken. And quite a few of the flag carriers are also recruiting, which is really, really good, because that hasn't been happening for a while. So by all means, like I was mentioning in one of my previous videos, apply. Make sure that when you have your licenses, you start applying and you start to pull in all contacts that you might have. Right, guys, I am get your questions on Instagram, and it doesn't seem to work, this chat, which I don't really understand why. But if you want to try Twitter, that might work as well. So not much on Twitter either. This might be the short chat history of live events, if you guys are not starting to ask me some questions soon, because I have quite a few podcasts or video podcasts lined up that I'm thinking about doing, but I don't have enough material to sit here and talk about them live just yet. When we talk a little bit about impacts, and one thing that I forgot to mention yesterday about the impacts of big airlines when it comes to fuel prices is that since the airlines are very, very sensitive to changes in fuel prices, the fuel prices ranges from around 30 to 50% additional costs of an airline. Most of them are actually hedging their fuel costs. So I didn't mention that yesterday. You'll see that mentioned from time to time in business newspapers and so on, that such and such airline has missed the hedged or has managed to score the hedge. What that means is that the airlines, they pre-buy fuel at a specific price. So if the airline feels that right now is a very good price, then they might go in and they might hedge that price, which means guarantee to buy at that price or a slightly higher price for maybe 1 or 2 years or something like that. So it's a bit of a from the airline's point of view, because if the fuel price drops, then of course they will be stuck with the higher fuel price. But also if the fuel price rises, they will also be stuck with lower fuel price. And really what's important from an airline's point of view is to be able to foresee the costs in order to foresee how their business is going. So that's why they're hedged. It's very similar like you do with your mortgage, for example. You can choose to have a floating mortgage, which moves up and down with the changes of interest rate, or you can have a fixed mortgage, which tells you that you're going to pay a bit of a pretty higher price, but you can then count on having the same price for X number of years. The airlines are doing exactly the same. So let's see. So it seems like there's a few questions coming in here now. So Garrett, I'm guessing that's your first name. I'm going to use that, Garrett. Garrett is asking, when it comes to type ratings, and some companies the students paid for their own. How is that money managed? You paid in advance, therefore you take a loan before the interview, or can you take a loan when the company is hiring you? It's a good question. I can only for myself here, my own experience. And what happened in my case was that I was asked to come in for an interview and an assessment, and it took 3 days of tests to establish whether or not I was suitable for the job. And once I was deemed and they actually offered me a position, then I had to say if I could accept it and pay it or not. Okay, so you have to kind of show the money before you start, before you go for an interview. But certainly, if you go for an interview and you know that there's a deal to pay for the type rating, it's a good idea to start checking out your bank contacts and make sure that you have money available in case they would offer you the job, because it can happen very quickly. In my case, it only took, I think, a month from when my assessment was done until I had to start a type rating. And when you start a type rating, then you have to have the money available. Sometimes it's you can pay it in installments. That's actually fairly common. So that the type rating is kind of divided into the ground school, fixed base stage, and the full flight stage. And it's part that you have to pay the half of the money for the first 2 parts, and then the rest for the last part. So that's different from company to company how they do this, but certainly before you go for an interview, that you actually have the possibility to do type rating if that is the case. I hope that answered your question, Garrett. So I have a question here from Color Mark, talking about different airlines. I have as a rule not to speak about specific airlines, and the reason for that is there's so many heated debates out there on the internet when it comes to which airline does what and why, and what is good with them, bad with them, and so on. So I have taken as a rule not to speak about specific airlines, because what I want this channel is to give my view and my experience on certain things within the airline business, but I don't want that to go into specific entities. There's a legal issue involved with that. I can't sit here and say whether I like something or I dislike something in that particular case. But there's also the fact that it's not what this is about. This channel is about to help guys like you, hopefully, that are on their way into the business to make sound decisions before you start your training. And that's what I want this to be about. If you want to discuss specific airlines and specific entities business, there are plenty forums to do that. Prune, for example, is an excellent forum, and you will have loads of views on pretty much the airport, airline, lounge you want to talk about. So I'm about it. So sorry about that, but that's the stance that I've chosen to take. So I can see some of you guys, Eric Lund, for example, are trying to send me messages over YouTube, and fortunately it doesn't. I can read the YouTube messages while the live stream is going on YouTube. Going on my Instagram account, it seems oddly enough to be the most efficient way to ask questions at the moment. I'll definitely try to sort this out in some way, so that it'll be easier for you to ask questions on my next pod. This is why I'm doing trial runs, basically, because I want to make sure what works and what doesn't. And for some reason, this chat function that I am trying to start up just doesn't allow you guys to send in questions. Oysten, very welcome to the channel. Great to have you here, and great that you're asking questions. So Oysten is asking that if some pilots are trying to avoid to have the nose wheel on the center line to lower the wear and tear on the wheel itself. Is that true, or is it just a myth? Well, they do exist. You'll be surprised once you get into this business how many experts are out there that have their own kind of theories on what to do and what not to do with an aircraft. The only thing I can say is that if you look at the flight crew training manual, for example, it will not tell you anything about avoiding centerline. Quite the opposite. You should be aiming to put your nose wheel down, bang on the centerline, and anytime that you manage to do that, you are a success. You have done it successfully. If the centerline lights would actually pose a threat to the equipment, as in the nose wheel, they would be redesigned. Okay. There's no, as the way I see it, there's absolutely no truth in the fact that you would increase wear and tear on your nose wheel. It should be said, that the nose wheel, as soon as it's being worn to limits, it's being changed. It's one of those safe life parts of the aircraft. So don't worry about that. If you can land so that you bang the nose, that you put the nose wheel down on the center line, then good for you. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. And don't listen to that. Okay. So Aviation Man, open up your own video in a new tab. I can try to do that. Let's see if that helps. If you give me 1 second, I'm just going to open up a new window here. Let's see if I can open up YouTube in that window. That could be a good idea, actually. Let's see. Technology is fantastic, but it's even better when it actually works. So let's see. No, it doesn't seem like I'm getting any of the comments up. If you're commenting on my videos, at least they're not coming up as notifications on here. So that was a good try. I should be said as well that I was born like 2 weeks after or before people started to become computer savvy. So I am really, really bad at this. That's why I'm doing trial runs, because I have to kind of understand, get my head around this. Tim is asking if I miss single engine flying, and I'm going to be honest and say that not really. Most people do. I probably will very soon, because single engine flying is fantastic. But I was so focused on getting to where I am when I was doing the single pilot part, so I didn't really get hooked into all the fantastic world that single engine flying can give you, which is, going out with friends, going to little airports out in the countryside, and really enjoying flying single engine. I never did that. But I am starting to feel now, as my kids are growing older and wants to go out and fly, that I probably will take up my single engine, single pilot license again, because, and here as well in Spain, it's fantastic. It's beautiful to fly around the countryside. So I will probably pick it up. But we're flying so much that during the off days, it hasn't really occurred to me that I want to go out to an airport. I just want to be home and with my family when I'm off. So Brandis 97, your question is, what are the big differences between a cadet program with a type rating and a type rating at a flight school? Which one do you think is best? I'm not 100% sure that I understand the question, because I'm guessing that you mean a type rating that you buy from an airline as opposed to a type rating that you buy from flying school. What I would say, and this is something that I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, actually the video pay to fly programs and buying type ratings. Generally, I would be very, very careful with buying type ratings which are not connected to either a job offer or at least line training with quite a lot of hours on it. And the reason for that is that even though it might look like a fantastic idea to get yourself a 737 or an Airbus 320 rating, the reality is that airlines requires you to have a minimum amount of hours in order to enter into direct entry. Most airlines, they have at least 500 type needed for you to be able to apply to as a direct entry position. Otherwise, if you have less than that, you're going to have to go in through their cadets, which will mean effectively buying the type rating again. And I've seen this happening. So be very careful when you go out and you buy ratings from flying schools, because the type rating in itself will be valid, but unless you can scrape up around 500 hours, I would say, is a minimum on the type as part of that program, it's unlikely that you'll be able to use it to apply to, especially to the airlines that you want to apply to. There will be airlines, possibly airlines like cargo airlines down in Africa, for example. It could be that the Asian market is open for people with type ratings but without hours. But the way that it's been historically anyway is that the insurance companies and the companies in themselves will not allow you to enter unless you have 500 hours, because it's they just want to be able to control how your type rating is done when you have that few hours on the aircraft, which actually makes sense. Think about it. So, Marquitos, your question here is, well, very nice to meet you too, I should say. What kind of profile are low-cost airlines looking for when recruiting young cadets? Well, they are looking for people that are trainable. People they feel have the capacity to go through the type rating, but they're also recruiting people that they think eventually will become good commanders. So they're looking for the same kind of pilots as any airline. It's not a different profile for low-cost airlines. You have to be a nice guy. Like I've gone through in detail what I think about this in one of my videos, how to pass an airline interview. So have a look at that one. It has quite a lot of information about this. But you should be, hireable. You should be someone that they want to have as a colleague. You should know your stuff. Make sure that you know your aircraft that you're flying on at the moment for your interview, because it's likely that they're going to ask you about that to see how much you picked up from your basic training. But you also have to show some flexibility, especially I would say if you're going in towards the low fare market, that you're willing to move, for example, and that you're willing to relocate from one country to a different country and so on. Because the reality is, and this doesn't go for just low fare airlines, this goes for every airline, is that if they have a huge operation, they are going to need you maybe in a different country than the one you live in, and you might not be able to return to your home country until several years later. So make sure that you show them that you are flexible in that account, because that's what they're going to need. I hope that answered your question, by the way. Oh, so Adi, welcome to the channel. According to you, which training school provides the best facilities and training to give us the best chance of securing a job? What do you think about CTC? I'm going to be honest here, and as an instructor, I always have to be honest. I am not an expert in the quality of flight schools around Europe, around the world. As in, I have gone through a flight school in Sweden called Scandinavian Aviation Academy. They're still around. I thought they were good. I know that CTC are getting good remarks from from the pilots that we are getting that have gone to a CTC. It seemed to be a very professional flight training organization. Basically, most of the big flight training organizations are good. There's a reason that they keep the prices high, because they have good facilities, they have good ways in. But that doesn't mean that the smaller schools, which maybe takes a half of the price that CTC does, are worse. They might not have as many contacts, but I can't sit here and tell you which school is better than the other, because I just don't have the knowledge to do that. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of it. What you are going to have to do is you're going to have to go in and you're going to go through like Peep Room, or there's loads and loads of forums available for pilots on the internet where you'll have previous students from all of the flight schools that you're considering. Talk to them, make sure that you get a personal contact. Also go to open days in schools to look at the equipment yourself, see how it's looking, if they're giving you a professional approach or not. Basically, what I'm saying is look through everything there is, talk to students, talk to them itself, ask whatever question that you have, ask about where, like accommodation, for do they have bank contacts so that you can get bank loan through what are their percentage of hiring after you've completed your training, things like that. Ask them the really questions, because that's what you need to get answered before you pay that kind of money, and it's only a professional way of doing it. More questions, guys. This is actually quite fun. Let's see. So Garrett once again, this is the question. So say if I get accepted for the interview, etc., when they send you the dates for when the typewriting will be commencing, will you be working in a team or do it alone? What about accommodation? Will the company give you guides and perhaps where to live? Quite obviously the students pays, and you will share an apartment with your typewriting partner. Excellent question, because this is what it comes down to in reality. For your first part of the question, you will be teamed up with someone else. Generally, I've only seen a very few instances where people have done typewritings themselves, and that's generally when the typewriting partner has dropped off for whatever reason. So you will be teamed up with another cadet. Some airlines will provide you with accommodation for costs. Some airlines will just give you, like on their website, which you will get to, they will have preferred accommodation where they might have certain deals with bed and breakfasts, or there might be apartments available nearby the training center that you can contact yourself, but things like that. But you will definitely be able to find some kind of accommodation. For the typewriting, it's fairly easy. Try to get it as close to the facility as possible, with as good communication possibilities as possible, and try to keep it cheap. Make sure your own kitchen and things like that, so that you can cook your own food, because that will keep us quite a lot. Line training gets a little bit more complicated, because depending on the availability of line captains, for example, you might have to change from one training base to another. I know that most airlines try to keep you in one base to make it as easy as possible for you. But if you're working over these, let's say for the summer month, for example, where there's a lot of pilots or line training pilots going on vacation, then you might have to move base. So it's harder to sign up for an apartment, for example, for 2 months, when you suddenly after 1 week have to change to something else. But this, you will always have people in front of you that have gone through the same. So talk to them, see how they have solved these problems, and it will work out for you. But do calculate on a slightly higher than normal living costs for the typewriting and for the line training. Typewriting normally takes reading around 2 months, so does the typewriting. So you have 4 months where you're going to possibly stay in bed and breakfasts and hotels, unless you can find some kind of cheaper accommodation close to the training center or your line training base. Guys, if you don't think that I'm answering your questions, or if you want more details to it, then please just continue to send in questions. I'll continue to answer them. So Jalio has asked a good question here. So upon being based abroad, can your partner just simply move with you? I'm assuming you're meaning your life partner here, as in your girlfriend or your wife, or your husband or boyfriend. I mean, of course, if you are being based abroad, if the company says that we need you in Rome, okay, you're going to be based in Rome. then it's completely up to you how you want to distribute your life. The company is not going to have any issues with that. They're just going to say that your work will start and terminate at this location. How you choose to do that, if you choose to move your whole family down, buy yourself a house, set your whole life up, or if you choose to commute, that's going to be completely up to you. I would say I'm always for moving to where your base is and moving your life with you, because I find that people are just more happy when they do that. It means that they can spend all their off time with their family at the place they are. They don't need to sit and think about flights or how am I going to get back and how I'm going to get there. And it tends to, if you can manage to get your life to the place where you're based, you're generally more happy. That's my personal opinion about it. So then you might have the issue of your partner working, having a good job where you're living at the moment, and then the most financially sound thing to do is commuting. So that's going to be up to you how you choose to do that. But the airline is not going to have an issue with your personal life. They don't have the right to have an issue with your personal life, basically. So we'll see. I'm going to go through and see if there's anything that's there. There seem to be a few tweets here. I'm quite new to Twitter as well, I should say. Right, guys, I don't seem to have gotten any questions on Twitter yet, or at least they're not popping up here. So keep doing them on Instagram. And then I'll see if there's any more questions here that I can be using. Okay, so Sibi13 has a question here. So I would like to know something about job offers. I'm from the Czech Republic, and when I'm done, I probably won't find a job here. Is it easy, within quotation marks, to get a job abroad? I heard that for Air Berlin wants only German pilots and not any foreigners. Is it even possible to find a job in Europe as an FO with 200 flying hours on a small plane and a fresh type rating? Yeah, so I covered this a little bit in the beginning of the live stream here. You need, if you have a type rating, you need at least normally these 500 hours in order to be able to apply as a direct entry first officer anywhere. There are jobs around, and more going up, because people everywhere are talking about pilot shortage, and that hasn't actually occurred yet. But the fact is that a lot of the baby boomers, the ones born in the 40s and 50s, are retiring one after another, which means that there are jobs popping up in the flag carriers. They are sucking pilots from the low-cost airlines. The low-cost airlines are expanding, so they need a lot of pilots. So I would say that, yeah, if you are a member, if you have a European pass, you have the ability and the right to work within Europe, I would say that the job market is not very good. There's a lot of competitions for all jobs, but that's the same with all jobs that are attractive. If there's a nice job with a nice salary at the end of it, there's going to be a lot of competition for it. So I'm not going to say that it's easy to get a job, but I would say that if you compare it to like back in 2002, 2003, after September 11th, when the market was completely dead, it's completely different now. Now there are jobs out there, especially if you're willing to move. So Jalio, what's the oldest age-wise new pilot that has flown with you? I can't really remember. I don't really look at them from that perspective. I mean, I have flown with guys up in their 40s that have joined, but I would say mid-30s up into the beginning of 40s, very few new pilots up to that. Then I've trained pilots that have come from different airlines as first officers still, but which are significantly older than that. But new cadets around 35 up to 40-ish would be at least among the oldest ones that I've flown with, but that doesn't mean much, really. It's just my own personal experience of it. All right, I'll see if I can lower the quality, Oyston. I don't think that it's, well, it might be my internet. I'll see if I can make any changes to the quality of the live stream here. I don't know, guys. Are you having troubles with the quality of the stream? Let me know in that case, and I'll see what I can do. No. I'll see. I'll fix that to my next podcast, but I'll think about it. I'm also, I'm using my wife's iMac, and it is not giving a great quality. It's almost 10 years old now, which means it's 1,000 years old in computer years. So eventually I'm going to get myself my own computer and use from that, which will probably increase the quality of the video as well, especially on these live streams. So Talix Alexander 078 need a degree before applying for a flight academy. Now, this is a question I get a lot. If you need a degree, it's a great idea to have a degree or not before you go into the airline business. And my question, or my answer to that, there are quite a few airlines, especially in the United States, that require you to have a degree before you apply for an airline, before you apply to any of their airlines. You can go into their web pages, check what their requirements are, and you'll see quite a few of them require you to have a college degree at least. That goes for some of the UK airlines as well. I did a video on this. I didn't find much information about it, but you can probably find the information you need. If it's a good idea or not, most flight academies, they don't give a rat's ass about whether or not you have a degree or not. They just want your money and to train you. So to get through a flight academy, you probably won't need a degree. But to get a job after going through the flight academy, you might need a degree. So look, if you're, in whatever country that you're thinking about applying to a job, then just go into whichever airline that you're thinking about, what your target is. Look at their web pages, look at what their recruitment policy and recruitment requirement are, and see if that says that you need a degree, a college degree, then that's what you need to do. I didn't need one. I don't have one. It's gone good for me so far, but that's just because my airline didn't have that as a requirement. That's why I was able to start at 20 years old, which is a very young age for starting in this business. I hope that answers your question, by the way. So Björn Karlsson, as a plan B, becoming a pilot, I was thinking about paying for the whole training myself, and I was going to do that in Iceland. Do you think it's worth paying for the training yourself? But in most cases, it's not a question of if it's worth it or not. It's a requirement. Most people do have to pay for their training themselves. Most people would have to take a mortgage or a loan from a bank in order to do that. If I think it's worth it, sure, if you can. I mean, this is also one of those things that I'm a little bit reluctant talking about because it's so different. I'm not going to tell people to spend, their entire life savings and their parents' life saving and pension plan on becoming a pilot and then not finding a job afterwards, because it does happen to people and you need to be aware of that. So whether or not it's worth it is fully depending on if you can get a job after or not, which is a little bit of a gamble, I would say. The thing that I've always saying, that I've said in most of my videos, is that make sure that you do a proper assessment, like a suitability assessment, before you start your training, so that there's no like psychological or physical hindrance to getting a job afterwards. Most serious flight schools, they will require you to take one of those tests before starting training, because if you can't go through that, if they find something that says that you're not suitable to do this job, then there's no point of spending 100,000 euros to go through your training and then just stand there not getting a job. So make sure that you do get a proper assessment before you start your training. And in my case, it was absolutely worth it. I was one of the very fortunate ones that got my training paid for by the Swedish government, except for my type rating, which I paid for myself. But I know quite a few people that have paid for the training and they are successful. But as I've always said, keep your costs down as much as possible, so that you don't stand there with a huge loan that you have to pay back, because that's going to lower your life quality quite a bit, and it's also going to limit the amount of jobs or the kind of jobs that you can take in the beginning. And of course, as with any job, the hard thing is to get past those first couple of years, where you're basically going to have to take whatever job you can in order to gain hours and experience. David Missa, did you ever cope with a very dangerous situation till now? Depending on how you define dangerous situations. I mean, technical malfunctions, they do happen. We're trained for that. That's what we train for. And of course, in 13 years, I've had a few of those, but not something that I would personally consider dangerous. It's fully within the scope of our non-normal procedures. And the airplanes that are built nowadays, they're fantastic. And our engineering team that works for my airline are magicians, fantastic. So they keep the airplanes in very, very good shape. So, sometimes you fly into weather, which is a bit challenging, I would say, with maximum crosswinds, very, very gusty conditions, thunderstorms, things like that. But we, as airline pilots, you always build in a buffer and you make sure that you keep yourself on the safe side of things. So if there's too much thunderstorms around an airport, we just don't fly there, we divert. The same goes for crosswinds and things like that. So we don't take risks. So the answer to that would actually be no, not really, because situations are being handled before they become dangerous. So Adrian is asking me about cost index. Cost index, just to explain, guys, what cost index is. The cost index is something that in modern Boeing aircraft we put into the computer to tell the computer how much we value flying fast, as in getting to the destination quickly, and saving fuel. And as you can imagine, the higher the fuel costs, the lower the cost index, because the airlines want to save as much fuel as possible. So the question that that I got yesterday on this subject was, do you change your cost index in order to get back on time? And the answer to that is no, never. Because it's, the company has stipulated that they want us to fly at a specific cost index. I am employed by the company. They pay me to do what they tell me. So I fly their cost index. It's also an environmental issue. So increasing the cost index from 6, which we use, to 600 would maybe save me 5 minutes, which it just isn't worth. So no, I don't change the cost index, and I don't change it down either. We have a fixed cost index that we're using. Sometimes on certain routes we get variable cost indexes, but generally speaking, no, we don't. We never choose it. We have the same cost index, and that's it. So Jack Hollisop has a question here. Is it worth writing to the head of the company, for example, Richard Branson, telling them what you like and want to do to become a pilot for the company, or do they don't give a toss? Well, I can't speak for Richard Branson, and he's famous for being very, very friendly to people that writes him. But I would say that most airlines, if you look at it, if you have an airline that employs 3,000-4,000 pilots, for example, and are employing 600 pilots, if you would start by actually answering these letters and saying that, oh, that's a great initiative of you, I'm going to see what I can do for you. You can imagine the kind of mountain of letters that would start dropping into him or her whenever that comes out into public knowledge. So I would say that it doesn't really matter. They will just answer politely, if even that, saying that please go through the appropriate channels to apply for the airline job. Okay, it's different if you manage if you all of a sudden find yourself sitting next to Richard Branson on a flight over to the States, then you could probably pull some strings, or if you know him personally or something like that. But generally speaking, writing letters to the head of companies asking for jobs would probably not be efficient, but that's just my view of it. You can try, it probably wouldn't hurt. Alex2709 asked, what made you choose your job as an airline pilot? What was your inspiration? I've done a podcast on this. I've actually started, I'm almost able to say that about all questions that's coming in. So when I was small, I wanted to become an archaeologist. All right. Up until I was like 11 years old, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to dig for skeletons and treasures, just like Indiana Jones. But my father, who was the head of a company, of an insurance company, head of sales for an insurance company up north in Sweden, where I'm from, he was traveling a lot. So he got himself a PPL in order to fly between the cities rather than drive. And I started following him on some of his trips. And that's when I started to become really, really interested in it. But then my father and my mom saw that, and they gave me as a present for my 14th birthday a test lesson with an instructor. So I went out on this beautiful, clear evening where there was not a movement in the air, and I flew with that instructor. He just told me what to do. I was at the controls the whole time. I flew over my house. I flew over my friend's house. It's G airspace up there, so you could climb and descend without telling anyone. So we were flying around doing all of these little exercises, and at the end he instructed me to turn back towards the airport, and then he talked me through the entire approach landing all the way down, and that's what made it for me. After that, I was done. I was bitten by the aviation bug, and it's been with me ever since. So from that moment, I knew what I wanted to do with my life, and I worked hard after that, which is a really, really good thing. And I'm talking about this in that it's how I became an airline pilot, that podcast. It's very, very good if you have a goal, because it makes life very easy for you. You can always look at which ways in life that you're going to turn in order to get where you want, instead of seeing all of these different options that, for example, colleges. You can choose all of these different college educations. What am I going to do? If you know what you want to do, it's so much easier, because you can choose, I'm going to take that because then I can do this after, and I can do that after, and it becomes much easier. And it also becomes a lot easier to motivate yourself in order to get your grades up, for example, and really stick in with those subjects that you don't really enjoy, or that you don't see any purpose with, but they suddenly they have a purpose, because you need to have a good grade in those subjects as well in order to reach that ultimate goal. So it's a great tool for motivation. So that's for me, that's really what drove me to getting as good grades as I had in, for example, mathematics. I'm not a mathematical genius. I had to work hard with mathematics and physics in order to get as good grades as I eventually did. But it did help me. It really did help me to have a goal. So Adrian asked how to improve your English to aim for level 6. Well, there's no way around this. You need to practice it. You need to practice. I'm teaching my children now. They're age 3 and 5, and they only get to watch cartoons in English. And my 5-year-old is speaking not perfect, but close to perfect English already, just by doing that, and also by listening a little bit. Me and my wife are speaking English to each other, but most of the time we speak Swedish to them. So they get their English from the TV. And I tell everyone to, if you're living in a country like Spain or Italy where they dub the movies and the TV programs, just stop doing that. Just put into original language and listen to it, because what you need is to be constantly listening to and using your English. Okay, you need a basic level which you get through your school. Then you need to improve that in the aviation context as well. So watch, air crash investigations in English, watch YouTube videos, talk to me in English, talk to everyone that you can in English. Practice, 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 practice. And then there are these apps available for aviation English. There are programs online that you can apply to in order to improve your actual aviation English. But I would say that the main thing is make sure that you watch everything you can in English and just get bombarded with English. That's how you improve. That and speaking it all the time if you can. Okay. If you really need to improve it, then consider going for a couple of months something to England, take a job as a bartender or whatever, and work there for 6 months. But if you do that, make sure that you don't go into a group with people from your own country and just speak your own language. Make sure that you speak English, because that's what you want. So Oysten Johansson 85 has asked, when planning a route, how do you determine what altitude to fly at? Well, we have a fantastic flight planning program called Lido, which is the Lufthansa flight planning program, and it takes into account everything that you can possibly think of. Obviously, we try to fly as high as possible normally, which is limited by our weight generally, so our available thrust at high altitude, our maneuverability at high altitude. But then after that, it also goes into looking at what kind of winds do we have at different levels. Is there anything like severe turbulence forecasted within the area that needs us to change to a different level? It takes all of that into account, and at the end of that, it goes in and say, okay, this level is going to give you the best economy, or it's going to keep you out of traffic congestions that might cause slots, for example, things like that. So we don't really have to think that much when you're flying for a commercial airline. They do that for you, and then you have to apply your own knowledge to that. But generally, we just fly the assigned route that we get, or the assigned altitude, flight level that we get from our flight plan. So Salvador from El Salvador has asked, what type of position can I aspire to with a CPL and 500 flight hours? Well, it's obviously going to be a first officer position, because you don't have an ATPL yet. And the position, I'm not 100% sure how it works in South America. But do you, for example, have any requirements for airlines there for like a minimum amount of hours that you need? If so, then keep working on them. Otherwise, just with 500 hours, if you would be in Europe, you'll be able to apply to most of the commercial airlines here as a cadet. And also, you'll probably get into, if you don't want to go in through a cadet program, you could probably go into a little taxi firm or something, flying mail at night or light cargo or something like that. So, the world is your oyster. There are possibilities out there, but I don't have any experience about the aviation market in El Salvador. I wish I did. I can't help you much more than that, I'm afraid. So Jalio asks, what was your most memorable moment whilst being a pilot? There's so many of them, really. I mean, obviously, you're always going to remember your first solo flight. It's a fantastic experience. The first time that you sit in an aircraft and you realize that it's you who are going to have to land it yourself. So my first solo flight is an easy answer to that. But then I have so many things that has happened during my 13 years that I can't give you a single one, except that one. So Aimstrom has asked, does it matter that I have not been in the Air Cadets and have no degree, but I'm going to be a young pilot fresh out of school? The Air Cadets is not going to have an impact on, I mean, those kind of organizations generally, unless Air Cadets is something else than what I think it is just for networking. You know, maybe people from the Air Cadets have gone into the airline business, and it's always great to have contacts in this business. But the second part there, if I don't have a degree, like I mentioned earlier in this live stream, it might have an impact. Like you might need a degree in order to get into the airline that you want to make sure. So you that too. The Boeing, it's Airbus, and no, I hope I'm not giving that kind of vibe out. No, absolutely not. I think both Airbus and Boeing are fantastic companies. They are making very reliable, very safe, and very maneuverable and good aircraft, both of them. I haven't had the pleasure of flying the Airbus yet, so I can't really speak about it. A preference when it comes to flying a yoke or flying with a joystick. I think that, you know, I would love to fly the Airbus, to try it, you know. From a professional curiosity point of view, it would be great. But I don't have a preference like that. I like flying Boeings. Boeings are like Volvo cars. They can take almost anything. They don't break that often. They're very but they're also very kind of old school. The buttons, the overhead panel looks the same as it did in the 707 on the 737. You know, the Airbus is more kind of 21st century technology, but also more delicate. So they all have their little kinks and their little pros and cons. Okay, so that, I have no real preference. Whatever the airline wants me to fly, I will fly. So Amstrom asks, my friend asked if it matters if he has a minor color blindness, and unfortunately the answer to that is yes. You know, it's depending what he means by minor. Go to an AME as an aeromedical examiner and check your vision. But generally, they do check for color blindness, and the reason for that is that a lot of instrumentation and a lot of the visual imprints that we get when we're flying, when we land, and so on, is based on color coding. So color blindness has, as far as I know, at least, been a no-go becoming a pilot. It does, you know, if there's a small one or not, I can't really talk about that. General complete color blindness is a no-go. I know that, but you're going to have to speak to, or your friend is going to have to speak to a proper aviation doctor in order to get a good answer to that, because I'm not. I'm only giving experience that I have myself. Right, so here's an interesting question. Aviation Man is asked, how important are the ATP exams to getting into a cadet program, for example, Ryanair? I got my first time passes, but an average of, I'm not going to put it here, internet. I know, for example, Flybe has require 90% average. Could those 0.8 deciding for me to be able to join an airline? Well, obviously, if you say that Flybe has a minimum, then it can be, but to my knowledge, well, for what I know about Ryanair, there's nothing like that. You will have, you need to have the proper licenses and papers. But if you are invited for an interview, it's going to be what you achieve on that interview that's going to decide whether or not you get the job, not what kind of ATPL exam results that you have. But it doesn't mean that other airlines doesn't have that as requirements. So do keep, for every one of you who is watching this, try to get as good exam results as possible. I mean, that speaks for itself. But it's not a no-go, at least from my experience. So Igresis asked, do you think a degree in professional flight in college is a good idea? Does it get you a step ahead, or is it just a waste of money? So this goes back to you. There's a lot of questions about this of getting a degree. From my experience, it is good to have a degree, and if you have a degree, it means that you have the possibility, possibly later on, to to possibly move to management because they love degrees. And when you get a little bit tired of flying, you might want to move that route. Some airlines do require a degree, so why not just take it in aviation in that case, if that's the area that you're going to be working on anyway. So I'm going to say that if you want to take a degree, that's a good thing, and in some cases it's an absolute must, especially if you're in the United States. So it's probably not a waste of money. Very rarely a degree is a waste of money. You will be able to use it some in the way. So guys, I've been running this for an hour now, so I'm running to the last couple of questions that I'm taking now, but I do enjoy this, and I hope you do too as well. And make sure that if you do like this, that subscribe to the channel as well. And tell your friends if you think that this is a good channel. Tell your friends to subscribe as well. I'm trying to grow the channel as much as I can, and I need your help to do so. So spread the word on YouTube and Twitter on what I can think of. Let's see. So it looks like the questions are starting to dry up as well. All right, guys. Let's see. I have one more here. So from Adi, what are your opinions about the MPL program being offered? My counter question would be which program, because a lot of airlines have MPL programs and they're all slightly different. And I don't really have any experience in MPL program. I have friends who do WAR instructors, and one of them was actually head of for a flight school that's MPLs. And I've done, once again, I've done a visit. I think MPL is going to be the future. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take some water here. I'm getting a lot of talking now. I think the MPL is going to be the future. And the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of airlines are requiring cadets, okay? And they want cadets that are trained in how to be a commercial pilot, not how to be a private pilot, then a commercial pilot, and then the airline pilot. They want the training to be streamlined toward their specific organization, because like in a lot of cases, their SOPs are becoming very complex and very detailed. The training that the cadets at an early stage, the better it will be, the better they will kind of fit into the airline in question. And also the MPL program is using new training inputs, as in they're looking at the world, the aviation world as a whole, and they're looking for trends, for example. And if they do see global trends of safety in one way or another, they are incorporating that into the program. So it's using actual inputs rather than the old way, which is train a pilot in exactly the same way. If you did your training in the 1980s, it's going to be more or less the same as when you do it in 2015. They are now adapting the program's to reality, which is something that's good. But it also means that people are flying a little bit less in the aircraft, and that has its downsides, because you do need to feel real air over your wings in stand. That's my view anyway. But you do get that in MPL as well, but you just get a little bit less of it. And that's really have an issue with it. Someone who hasn't flown an aircraft more than maybe 70, 80 hours are now going to sit in front of a big jetliner. But my experience with training cadets is that's not really a problem. It doesn't really matter how many, PPL hours they've had when they get into a jetliner, because it's all going to be different anyway. And it's so much that they have to get used to. So I think MPL is probably here to stay, and I think it's probably a good thing. That's my personal view of it anyway. So Alexander is asking, do you join Flight Academy after A-levels? I have actually answered this in a previous podcast, and I don't really know. It's depending on what kind of Flight Academy that you're joining. Okay, so that's my my video about for starting your training. It's one of my videos that I did a couple of weeks back. So last question of the day, guys. It comes from Igresles. Sorry pronunciation anyway. So, do you think that pilots will computers fly the planes themselves in the future? Well, I mean, the honest answer there is that we are moving towards more and more automation. I think that the day will probably come where we see a computer flying commercial airplanes, but I don't think that it's going to be passenger jets for a long, long time to come. I do think that we'll probably see maybe cargo flights flown by drones at some point. I do think that there's a possibility that we might see only one pilot in the cockpit rather than two, where maybe the second pilot is situated on the ground taking care of multiple flights. I know Boeing is working on a system like that, where they take away one of the pilots. So there'll be one that's operating the systems up there, and then in case of an emergency or in case something happens, the second one will be kind of checked in via data link. But this is all years and years into the future. We are moving that way because everything is moving towards more automation and more complex systems. So eventually, yeah, I think that maybe not completely gone because people don't want to fly aircraft, sit in aircraft where there's only a computer that can go syntax error in the front. But definitely we will see some changes. But you know, the thing to remember here is that we are still flying, like I said, the 737 with an overhead panel from a 707. That's because changes in aviation takes a lot of legislation in order to go through. And I think as a change as big as taking one pilot out of the cockpit or replacing the pilots completely will take so much testing and so much legislation to go through, and that I can't see that within my workable lifespan. I don't think I will see it. Maybe, you know, this is me just wildly guessing here, but, you know, within maybe 30, 40 years or so, we could see that. We would probably see drones flying more and more commercial jobs before that. But passenger aviation, passenger transport, I can't really see that happening anytime soon, but it will happen eventually. Just like with pretty much any job that you can point at. This is one of the big things that humanity has to face going forward, is that more and more of our jobs are being taken over by computers that can do it just as good or better. What we are going to do eventually, that's hard to say, but I don't think that for you guys that are going into aviation now, or for me, that is actually going to be a big problem. Maybe for your grandchildren. That's my guess anyway, but I could be wrong. You know, people have been wrong about predicting these things before. So on that positive note, I want to thank everyone for the views. I want you to send in what you thought about the podcast, and I'll be happy to do this in the future as well. But I'm going to do that with a bit of a. I want to tell people basically when I'll do it. The first goal I've set up is 2,000 subscribers. If I get to 2,000 subscribers, I'll do this again immediately, just as a bonus. But then I'll see when there's something that I want to discuss, I'll bring it up, or I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do this, but I do like this. I do like the direct connection that I get with you guys by answering questions immediately, and I hope you do as well. So for now, have a great week. I'm going into the simulator now for this week, and then I'm going on 2 weeks of vacation. So it might be a little bit of a slowdown in the amount of videos being posted, but I'll continue doing this as long as you guys want me, and as long as there is no other problem that appears or anything else I need to do. So for now, good night.